What's going on, guys? Welcome back to our weekly watch list. This is going to be Summary of Markets Week 70. Let's get started with SPY. So SPY had a pretty strong week last week. It kind of looks like a cup and handle where you had that original high come in, you had that rollover towards the high, pull back off the resistance, and now we're popping back into it. If we can break above this all-time high right around 4227, we should easily be able to hit our target around 4246, and then we have 428. So that would be the upper target there. If we get a really strong breakout, then we're starting to look into like the 435 to 440 range. Right now, I would definitely lean bullish. You had Yellen saying some things over the weekend about interest rates. So we're going to have to wait and see kind of how we open around 6 o'clock today. So like 3 hours from now, we're going to have to see how the market's open. But I'm guessing they're going to be pretty stable. And if we get any kind of bullish momentum, Monday should be a very strong day. So be on the lookout for the breakout of all-time high. The momentum is already pretty clean. Doesn't look like there's any bear divs or anything. So if volume comes in here, you definitely could start seeing like at least 425 to 428. Moving on to gold. Gold had a little bit of a pullback last week. You kind of got really close to our 1920 target, and then he pulled back. I told you guys that you were forking off of this trend. You were creating a more bullish trend. And I told you guys if it broke that trend, very likely going back down to the original trend, right? So that's kind of what happened. You broke the trend, went back to the original. You bounced a little early right off the OTS trail, giving you a buy the dip signal. You bounced right off our 1871 target as well. Or sorry, not target, level. So a lot of support there. If you can reclaim that trend, that would be pretty bullish, but it doesn't really have to. That's not really how these trends work. It doesn't have to reclaim that. But if we go ahead and delete this, this trend is the one you want to pay attention to now that the more bullish one is broken. So as long as we slowly climb, get above that 1920 target, there is another target around 1950 and then around 2000, okay? So be on the lookout for that. If it does break this trend, then I would start looking for probably around the 1800 support. Moving on to oil. Oil has been pumping. You broke that resistance that we've been failing for some time around 67. Got above that. Our target was around 70. That's right there. It's about to be hit. If it can hit that, look for 71.40. Get above that, then you're looking for 76. Okay? If you can pull back here, break back below like 67, then you want to start looking for 65 to around 63, where the 50-day moving average is. Right now, the momentum is very bullish. This is not looking like a fake out, so most likely oil should continue. So be on the lookout for that. Bullish strength most likely incoming next week. Bitcoin, we talked about how it had this little triangle here, and I told you guys not to really pick a direction until that triangle kind of played out. It looks like it is wanting to play out to the downside. So we lost that pivot again, but that doesn't really matter. The pivot's kind of the middle of the accumulation, so you're gaining it and losing it quite often. But we did lose it again, and then we also lost this triangle here. So it tried to come up and break that high, couldn't do it, and now we're breaking the low. So it looks like Bitcoin wants to go lower. There's a lot of support right around this like 33,000 area. If you can break below that, very likely going back to 288 and then maybe even 265. Okay. If it can reclaim, like maybe fake out and then reclaim, break the OTS trail somewhere around 40,000. There's a little bit of resistance around 42, and then you're looking for 45. I would definitely lean bearish here though. Same thing with Ethereum. You tried to break out. There's just too much resistance there. You have the OTS trail. You have the 50-day moving average. You have a lot of resistance here just from candles. It just didn't have enough steam to really get above that. The Momo is also losing steam here. It has not confirmed a bottom, so the bears look like they're in complete control. If this Momo flips back below zero and you start to see some sell pressure here, maybe back below 2,300, this could easily nuke down to 2,000, maybe even around 1,700. Okay, so I would lean bearish on this as well, at least until we reclaim the 50-day moving average around like 3,000. Okay, if you can reclaim 3,000, then I'd be looking for somewhere around 32 to 36. But all right, that is the write-up. Let's move on to our watch list. So the energy sector is going to pump with oil. It basically follows oil to a T. So The breakout trigger would be around 56 and a quarter. Break above that, you're going to head towards most likely around 60. Okay, keep an eye on that. UPS, I still like it. Pulled back a little bit. You do have a buy the dip signal here. If you can get back above the resistance around 215, I think you go into 220, 225. AMC, my chart's a little messy here, but it hit our 2618 and our 1618 targets, the $50 target and the $69 target. You're not able to get above 69. If you do, it could go again to 87, but it's very, very unlikely. These moves like this, once they start to lose steam, it's very hard for them to pump just as hard as it pumped originally. So that 69 is going to be a very strong resistance. You have 50 as well right above you. Most of the support is around 40 to 35. Okay. REGN, we called this one out back when it did this doji on May 27th, right when it was kind of flipping this market structure into a bullish trend. Very, very clean trend coming in. You have some buy the dip signals. It's hitting a pivot, but if you can break above that, very likely going to the top of the channel around 535. So keep an eye on that. DRE, I told you guys above 47, you were going to get these upper targets around 48, 48 and a quarter. Next targets are 49 to 49.50. Very slow mover. SSTI, we're not really watching this one anymore because you failed the resistance. If you can get above that, then you want to look for 45. Eli Lilly, I like this trend here. If you can break above this gap, you could start going for these highs up here. So probably pushing into like 216 to 218. But you have to reclaim that pivot around 206. Lumen, I really like this breakout on Lumen. If it can stay above like 1475, I think you're going to get 1550 to around 1650. This inverse head and shoulders here, not really an inverse head and shoulders, but kind of a cup and handle. You should be able to break out to around 16 and a quarter. Snow has a very beautiful falling wedge breakout with a bull div. Nice little consolidation here to gain some value. You're consolidating right above the pivot. If you can hold above 245, very likely going to break out probably to around 270 to 290. BGCP was one that I mentioned last week. Just have this very nice trend where you pull back and then you rip into the highs. And it's basically been doing this for the past few months. So we pulled back, bounced off the 50, ripped into the highs, and now we hit our target around 615. Next target would be around $6.70 to $7. Next up is Doordash. Once again, very nice falling wedge here. Broke out of the wedge. Kind of hit a little bit of resistance up here. Pulled back to the wedge. Also bouncing off the 50-day moving average. If it can bounce back above this pivot, you do have a couple of anchored VWAPs. You could take an anchored VWAP from the all-time high. You could also take one from the IPO. And they both line up kind of around this area. If you can break above this area, you will be breaking all the anchored VWAPs. You could also take one from the all-time low, and that also lines up as support. So look for those levels. Next up is NEO. I closed my NEO shares for a I think it was 22 or 20% gain, somewhere around there. I do want to get back in NEO if we can start breaking above 43. But I anticipated a lot of chop in this area, which we did get. So those 3 days there were choppy. So I'm happy that I closed. But if we can break above this 43 and kind of re-enter that uptrend, I will probably buy back most of my shares. So if it doesn't break out, I'm already happy with 20%. But if it does, we could be looking at like a $55 to $60 midterm target. Next up is Laser. I call this one out in Discord pretty early. You had a breakout of this little triangle here, and it looks like it might pull back to retest it, but either way, very bullish breakout. Momentum's already climbing. If you can start holding above like 24, 25, you should be able to rip higher towards that $30 pivot. One of my favorite charts here is Costco. Beautiful ascending triangle, even on the weekly as well. You can see that we had 3 inside candles here, and now we're breaking out. This is called a 3 inside up. So we do have nice little inside bars being broken to the upside. If this can break above like 390, get above this daily ascending triangle, this thing could easily go to 400, maybe even like 420 long-term target. So the momentum's already climbing. We just need to see a break of this high. One stock that popped up on my short squeeze scanner, I know a lot of you guys have been watching like AMC, GameStop, all these meme stocks, right? BlackBerry, Nokia. They were short squeeze companies, right? So when that starts to happen, I like to pay attention to my short squeeze scanner, and I like looking for things that are above like 25% short float. They have a lot of days to cover, and this was one of them. This stock is one of the most heavily shorted stocks on the market right now, and it also has a 33% short float with 15 days to cover. So that is extremely high. That means that if it starts to break out based on the average volume right now, it could run for a very long time before it could fulfill that short float, right? To break the short float. So I'm anticipating that if the short squeeze companies continue to run, or the money pulls out of these big names and goes into the smaller names, we should be able to see a move to at least 15 on INSG. So be on the lookout for that. Very tight stop loss, obviously, on that play. Next up is XRT. I'm still heavily invested in the retail sector. I think I'm slightly positive, maybe break even here. It keeps trying to break above this pivot, but it's just not finding any value above 95. If we can start finding value above 95, look for 98 and then 103. But it really doesn't like this high right here. We're going to need some either earnings coming out for these big companies because it is an ETF, or we're just going to need the overall market to start climbing. Next up is Jets. This is the airline ETF. I think they will continue to run. I think once it pushes higher past this 27 and a quarter, there's a pivot here that's holding us down. Same thing with XRT. But if we can get above that pivot, I think it continues to run all the way up to like 30, maybe even like 35. So this would be like a little bit of a longer term play. If we start to break below like 25.50, I'll probably look to get out of my shares. Another one that I still like is CCL. Had a little bit of a pullback last week, but we're up like 15% on our leaps already. We got a pretty good entry on that. If it can break above this local high, there is a beautiful weekly chart, but that weekly last week, not so good. Not the confirmation that we wanted to see after that breakout candle. But even if it pulls back here, I think there's a lot of support around that $28 area. So I think as long as you hold above 28, this should be going higher to like 32, maybe even 36. That is it for these. I do have some big tech charts I want to go over before we close this up. So if you guys are in the Discord, if you guys are in the $30 tier or the higher tier, if you guys pay attention to my analysis channel, I have been doing a different kind of analysis recently. I've been doing more of lottos. So I give you guys weekly contracts where I tell you if Microsoft breaks above 248, look for the 250 calls as a lotto. And these lottos are not designed to be held until expiration, but they're designed to be used as scalps. I just started a Google sheet where I'm going to start tracking these. Sadly, I didn't start it before Friday because I can't see that data because those contracts expired. But if you guys look at the calls in Discord, a lot of those calls went up like 200 to 400%. We had big movers on Netflix, big movers on Microsoft. The Q's one was big. We had I think it was a Facebook play that happened. The Tesla play was big, but I didn't give a lot for that one. That was just levels. But make sure you guys pay attention to the analysis channel. I'm going to be posting more lottos starting tomorrow. So be on the lookout for that. We'll post that tomorrow. But let's get into big tech here before we get going. Microsoft above, let's say, 252. I think you can get to 254.75. So somewhere around that VWAP. So be on the lookout for that. Below 248, you'll probably go down to the gap fill around 245. Apple had a nice bounce here off support. If it gets above 127, look for around 129.75. If it gets back below 123, look for 121. Facebook bouncing off support as well. If you can get above 334, I'd look for 340 to 345. If you get below 326, I'd look for around 320. Netflix failing resistance here. If it gets below like 486, I would look for around 480 to 467. If you get above 505, I'd look for around 513 to 522. Amazon also failing resistance. If it can get below, I'd say 3180, then you want to look for around 3135. If it can get above, 3223, look for around 3260 to 3280. Last but not least, Tesla. It failed that resistance almost to the penny around 635. If you can get back above VWAP around 612, 613, you should be able to get back to that 635, maybe even 666. If it gets below 564, look for around 538. But all right, guys, that is the summary of markets. That is our weekly watch list. Like I told you guys, make sure to watch the analysis channel tomorrow. I will be posting some new lottos for this week. All right, guys, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace out.